Hi, I'm Darla. My sister showed up after 5 years of silence, sending me a box of cupcakes tied in a white ribbon, like I was supposed to swallow the past along with the frosting. No note, no apology, just her voice the next day, asking if I liked them. I told her I gave them to her husband. She went silent, then screamed. But what she didn't know was that the cupcakes were just the start. The truth she buried? It's coming for her now. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening and where are you right now? Drop it in the comments. You're about to see what happens when a quiet sister finally stops forgiving. I woke up before the alarm, as I usually do, the hush of dawn wrapping around the house like a thin blanket that didn't quite warm me. The heater kicked on, rattling through the vents, reminding me it was still March in Austin, still cold enough that the floor bit at my feet when I swung my legs off the bed. I pulled on a sweater, the same one I wore too often, and headed to the kitchen, flipping on the light that hummed overhead. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream, the same bitter sip that kept me company these last 5 years since I walked away from everything that used to mean family. My inbox glowed with work reminders, court documents I needed to proof before the end of the week, client notes that could wait another hour. I sipped the coffee, glanced at the leafless trees outside the kitchen window, branches scratching softly against the pane with every small gust. I hadn't heard from them since the fallout. 5 years of birthdays, Thanksgivings, Christmases passing without so much as a text from Verity or Isolde. I was the youngest, the one who kept my head down, tried to hold the family together until I finally saw how they let me be the glue while they tore each other apart, and blamed me for the mess. A single knock pulled me from the dull hum of the morning, sharp enough to make me freeze mid-step. Not the hurried knock of a delivery driver, just one clean rap and then silence. I waited a moment, then opened the door, and there it was, sitting on the welcome mat that never quite welcomed anyone. A box, small, wrapped in plain white paper with a white ribbon tied neatly, the bow so precise it looked like something out of a catalog. My name, Darla, written on a slip taped to the top in handwriting I hadn't seen in half a decade, but would know anywhere. Isolde's handwriting, neat, almost architectural, the loops and lines measured like she was afraid of wasting ink. My breath fogged in the chill, and I stood there a moment longer, the box cradled in my hands, heavy for its size. I brought it inside, set it on the counter. The coffee had gone cold. I reheated it in the microwave, the hum too loud in the quiet, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at that box like it might open itself if I waited long enough. Memories crawled in, Isolde laughing at the dinner table, the two of us washing dishes while Verity smoked on the porch, the last Thanksgiving before the fight, when the air between us had been tight with unspoken things, the moment when she'd said, "You always think you're better than us," and I'd replied, "I just don't want to be like you." I'd walked out then, slamming the door, leaving them to their chaos, thinking I'd find peace in the silence. I hadn't. I picked up the box, turned it in my hands, checking the seams of the paper, the sharpness of the corners. It was too perfect, too deliberate. I set it back down and tried to busy myself, washed the mug, wiped the counter that was already clean, checked my phone. Nothing from work that needed immediate attention, nothing from anyone, really. No note, no message, just the box. It stayed on the counter all day, following me with its quiet weight as I moved through the small rental, folding laundry, sorting mail, trying not to look at it and failing. By the time the sun dipped behind the bare trees, painting the sky with bruised purples and oranges, I had decided to ignore it. But as darkness settled, I found myself standing in front of it again, fingers hovering over the ribbon. I pulled at it, the knot slipping free too easily, the paper falling away to reveal a white bakery box, unbranded, clean. I lifted the lid. Cupcakes, 6 of them, each topped with perfect swirls of frosting, the colors soft pastels, the kind you see on Pinterest boards for baby showers and weddings, each one different, a pale pink rose, a blue daisy, a soft lavender swirl. They looked handmade, but with the kind of care Isolde would have demanded, each detail exact. Something in me cracked a little seeing them. That old ache for family, for the soft moments before the yelling and the accusations, for a sister who wasn't always a blade pressed against my peace. For a moment, I wondered if this was her way of saying sorry, if maybe she had changed, if maybe I wasn't foolish to hope for that. Then I saw it, tucked under the last cupcake in the corner of the box, a small folded piece of paper, smudged with frosting along the edge. I pulled it free with careful fingers, unfolding it slowly as if it might crumble. "I never forgot what you did." 7 words in that same neat handwriting, but the coldness in them cut sharper than the air outside. My stomach twisted, the cupcakes suddenly looking like threats in their perfect frosting, and I felt the old fear return, the fear that Isolde's kindness was always a mask for something else. What did she mean? What did she think I did? The last words we spoke came back to me, that day when the will was read, when Verity had looked at me like I was a stranger, when Isolde had turned away, her jaw tight, her eyes cold. I placed the note back in the box, closed the lid, and paced the kitchen, the tile cold under my feet, my breath catching every time I looked at the box. Throw them out, I told myself. Call her and demand to know what she meant. Ignore it, pretend it never came. Instead, I opened the fridge and made space, moving aside the milk, the jar of pickles I never finished, and set the box on the middle shelf. I closed the door, leaning against it for a moment, my hand flat against the cool metal, eyes closed. I took a sip of cold tea and stared at that box, knowing tomorrow would demand an answer I wasn't ready to give. The tea had gone cold, but I kept sipping it, the bitter taste reminding me I was awake, here, and not drifting off into memories I couldn't afford to relive. Morning light cut through the blinds in thin lines across the table, landing on the box inside the fridge every time I opened the door for no reason, as if checking to see if it had vanished on its own. It hadn't. I paced around the kitchen, tracing the same path from the sink to the window, past the little dining table, around the counter, then back again. The silence in the room was too thick, pressing into my ears until I could almost hear the words Isolde had written, echoing in the empty space. "I never forgot what you did." What did she think I did? Because in my mind, it was her who turned her back, her who took what wasn't hers, her who twisted every conversation to make me the villain before I even realized the roles had been decided. I checked the clock on the stove, 817. I'd washed the same cup twice already, wiped the same spot on the counter that didn't need cleaning, and now I was standing there, staring at the digital numbers as if they might tell me what to do next. Then the phone rang. The sound pierced through the stillness, sharp enough that I jumped, the cup in my hand rattling against the sink. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. I hadn't seen that number in years, but it was burned into me from the days when she used to call at all hours, needing something, demanding something, pretending it was always for my own good. My finger hovered over the accept button, heart pounding in a way that made me angry with myself. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't going to let her decide how my day would go. I answered, "Darla." Her voice came through the speaker, light, casual, like nothing had ever happened. "So, how were the cupcakes?" I didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch just long enough for her to feel it, for the calm in her voice to falter. I could almost see her, sitting in some tidy kitchen, nails perfectly painted, pretending to be the sister everyone admired. "Did you enjoy them?" she tried again, the fake warmth almost sweet if you didn't know her. I leaned against the counter, looking out at the yard where the grass was still dead from winter, waiting for spring to make it green again. "You know," I said, keeping my voice as even as I could, "I wasn't sure what to do with them." "Oh," a little crack in her tone, almost too soft to notice. "Well, I thought it might be nice, you know, after all this time. We should talk." I let the quiet build again, because I wanted her to sit in it, to squirm just a little. Then I said, "I gave them to your husband." Nothing. Silence so loud it felt like a scream waiting to happen. Then she did scream. What did you do?" I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at it like it might explain the sudden panic spilling from her. Her words tumbled over each other, sharp and messy, the kind of panic that wasn't about cupcakes. "Are you insane, Darla? Why would you do something so stupid?" "I don't understand why you're so upset," I said quietly, though inside I could feel something coiling tight, a warning that I had just stepped into something I didn't fully see yet. "Don't play games with me," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You don't know what you've done." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, pushing myself off the counter to stand straighter. "Maybe you should explain it to me then." The other end of the line went quiet, so quiet I thought she might have hung up. Then I heard her breathing, ragged, uneven, like she was trying to pull herself back together before speaking again. "You need to get rid of them," she finally whispered. "What's in them, Isolde?" I pressed, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the fear creeping in around the edges. "You don't understand. You never did," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. Real or not, I couldn't tell anymore. I swallowed, gripping the phone tighter, staring at the fridge like it might open on its own, like those cupcakes were going to jump out and tell me the truth she wouldn't. "I think it's time you tell me," I said, low and firm, refusing to let her control this moment. There was another breath, a hitch, and then the line went dead, leaving me with nothing but the soft hum of the dial tone and the echo of her last words bouncing around in the quiet kitchen. I stood there, the dial tone humming, realizing I had just torn the first stitch off a wound none of us were ready to face. I lowered the phone, the hum of the ended call buzzing in my hand, vibrating through my bones as if it might crack them from the inside out. I set it down on the table gently, afraid that any sharp movement would shatter the uneasy calm that had fallen over the kitchen. The street lamp outside cast a pale glow through the blinds, drawing shifting patterns on the floor as a breeze moved the branches outside. I hadn't turned on the overhead light, letting the shadows keep me company while I paced, trying to make sense of Isolde's fear, her screaming, her command to get rid of the cupcakes. The box was still in the fridge, sitting there like a dare, reminding me every time I opened the door to pour another glass of water I didn't even want. The faint sweetness of frosting clung to the cold air, sharp and wrong in the silence of the house. I lay on the bed, fully dressed, staring at the slow circles of the ceiling fan, letting it mirror the thoughts I couldn't stop from looping around and around. Isolde's words, her panic, the edge in her voice, it all replayed with each creak of the fan's blades. "You don't know what you've done." I replayed that phrase over and over, trying to force it to reveal something. Anything. What was she afraid of? Me? Gideon? Herself? Or was it something else? Something hidden beneath the neat swirl of buttercream and the white ribbon that had looked so perfect? I pulled the thin blanket tighter around me, but it did nothing to stop the cold seeping into my skin. My eyes burned from staying open too long, but every time I closed them, I saw Isolde's face at the last family dinner. The way she had looked right at me while pretending I didn't exist, laughing at something Gideon had said, reaching over to take the napkin I had folded into a leaf and tossing it aside like it was nothing. My phone lit up on the nightstand, the screen bright in the dark room, cutting through the shadows. I didn't recognize the number, but my chest tightened the way it does when you know the call is about to change everything. The message was simple. "We need to talk, G." I stared at it, the glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes as I tried to decide if I should answer, if I even wanted to know what he had to say. Gideon had always been polite to me. The brother-in-law who offered to fill my glass at dinner when no one else noticed I was empty, who once whispered, "You okay?" when I had gone quiet at the table, drowning under Isolde's stories about her own greatness. I remembered the soft sound of the napkin crumpling when she snatched it from my hand, the way Gideon had looked at me then, a flicker of something like pity in his eyes before he turned away, pretending he hadn't seen. The phone buzzed again, another message. "About the cupcakes, please." I let out a breath, realizing I'd been holding it since the first message came through. I sat up, letting the blanket fall to the floor, cold air hitting my bare arms as I typed back, "About what?" The reply came so fast it made me jump. "Can we meet tomorrow? Somewhere public?" I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my forehead, feeling the hum of fear, curiosity, and a thin thread of anger twisting together until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. What was in those cupcakes? What had Isolde done, or what did she think I had done, that could make Gideon reach out to me in the middle of the night? I stood up, walking to the window to look out at the empty street, the quiet neighborhood that felt too still, too safe for the chaos boiling just beneath its surface. The sky was just starting to lighten, the first hint of dawn touching the tops of the houses across the street, promising another day I wasn't ready to face. I typed back, "Where?" A moment passed before the reply came. "The coffee shop on Main, noon." I didn't respond, letting the screen go dark in my hand. The ceiling fan continued its slow spin above me as I walked back to the bed, sitting on the edge, watching the first rays of sunlight catch on the edges of the blinds. I turned off the small lamp beside the bed, the click loud in the quiet room, and as darkness settled again, I realized I wasn't afraid of Isolde anymore. I was afraid of the truth waiting in Gideon's eyes. Morning came gray, the kind that soaks into your bones before you even step outside. I dressed in quiet, moving around the small kitchen as the rain tapped against the windows, the air thick with the scent of leftover coffee grounds I couldn't bring myself to throw out yet. I parked across from the diner, watching the neon sign flicker, trying to gather the courage to step inside. It wasn't fear of Gideon I felt. It was the weight of everything I had ignored for too long, the silence that had wrapped around me like a shield, one I wasn't sure I was ready to drop. Inside, the place smelled like burnt toast and cheap coffee, a comforting reminder of every small-town diner I'd ever stopped at during late drives home from work when I was too tired to cook. I chose a booth by the window, the vinyl seat cracked under me as I settled in, folding my hands to keep them from fidgeting. Families laughed a few tables over, a kid banging a plastic spoon on the table, his mother gently scolding him with a tired but genuine smile. I watched them, letting the ache settle in my chest, reminding me of everything I never had in those family dinners that turned into arguments, silence, or sideways glances meant to cut. The door chimed, and Gideon stepped in, looking older than I remembered. His hair was uncombed, a wrinkle cutting across his shirt where it hadn't been ironed, and his eyes darted around before landing on me. For a moment, he looked like he might turn around and leave. He made his way over, sliding into the booth across from me, his hands wrapped around the warm coffee cup the server set down without asking. The rain continued its gentle drumming outside, matching the quiet tension between us. We didn't speak for a moment, letting the sounds of the diner fill the space. I stared at the condensation sliding down the window, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Why did you want to talk about the cupcakes?" I asked, my voice calm, but my fingers traced the edge of the napkin in front of me, folding it absent-mindedly into a small leaf shape. His eyes flickered to it, then back up to meet mine. "Because you need to know what's going on." I waited, letting him speak on his own terms, watching the struggle move across his face. "She was going to take them back," he finally said, his voice low, rough. "When she realized you might have eaten them, she panicked. She didn't tell me why, but she lost it." I didn't move, letting the words settle. The cupcakes were a message, but I hadn't realized how sharp their edges were. "And you?" I asked. "I intercepted them before she could. I thought it was just another one of her games, you know how she is, but she's hiding more than you think." He took a shaky sip of coffee, glancing around as if expecting her to walk in. "You think I don't know how she is?" I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. His shoulders dropped. "She's been stealing from Verity's estate, for years." The words fell into the space between us, louder than the chatter around us, the clink of forks on plates, the hiss of the coffee machine. "What?" I whispered, though I'd heard him clearly. She's been funneling money into accounts under the guise of family expenses, home renovations, medical bills for Verity that never existed. I found the ledgers." His hand moved to his pocket, pulling out his phone, the screen lighting up as he scrolled through spreadsheets and bank statements. I stared at the numbers, the transactions, the slow siphoning of what little we had, realizing how easy it had been for her to thrive while I struggled, scraping by in that tiny apartment, living paycheck to paycheck while she smiled for Christmas photos, telling everyone she was helping Mom. "She's afraid you're going to expose her," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's why she sent the cupcakes. I think she's capable of worse if she feels cornered." I let the napkin fall from my fingers, the small folded leaf unfurling as it hit the table. I felt the betrayal settle into something sharper, something like anger, but it wasn't hot. It was steady, clear. "And you want me to help you expose her?" I said, not asking, just stating. Gideon nodded, the lines around his eyes deepening. "I can't do it alone. She'll bury me, Darla. You know how she can spin things. But you know the truth." I leaned back, the vinyl squeaking under me, looking out at the rain that had picked up, streaking the window in long, cold lines. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let the chaos eat them from the inside, to finally be free of the family that had treated me like a shadow. But I thought of the nights I spent eating instant noodles while she flaunted new jewelry. I thought of Mom's confused smile when I visited, the way Isolde would usher me out saying, "Mom needs her rest," when what she really meant was, "We don't need you here." No, I couldn't walk away this time. I looked back at Gideon, meeting his tired eyes. "I'll help you," I said. "But I want to know everything." He nodded, relief flooding across his face, and for a moment I saw the man who had once handed me a drink at a family barbecue telling me, "You deserve better than the way she treats you." The server dropped the check on the table, and we both reached for it, our hands brushing before I pulled mine back. Gideon insisted on paying, sliding a few crumpled bills under the ceramic mug before standing, his shoulders straighter now than when he had walked in. As I stepped outside, the rain was still falling, the air cool against my skin, washing away the heaviness of the diner's warmth. I clutched the napkin in my hand, now damp and wrinkled, but it felt like something solid to hold on to as I walked to my car. I left the diner clutching the rain-wet napkin, knowing I couldn't walk away this time, not when the truth was finally within reach. Driving through North Austin that late morning, the clouds pressed low, heavy enough to make the air feel thick. I kept the windows cracked, letting the cool air hit my face as I rehearsed what I might say, what I wouldn't let her twist. I pulled up to her small, neat house, the same one I used to mow the lawn for every summer, the one I left without looking back 5 years ago. I parked along the curb, engine ticking in the quiet street, the chirping of birds slicing through the dense silence. My hands rested on the steering wheel, watching the walkway I used to run down with dandelions for her, back when I thought love was enough to keep us together. Stepping out, gravel crunched under my shoes as I made my way up the path, noting the porch still had the same faded mat with "Welcome" nearly worn off. I remembered leaving flowers there on Mother's Day, back before Isolde turned everything into a battlefield I didn't know I was fighting. I took a breath that felt too shallow, then knocked. It took a while for her to answer, but the door cracked open, and there she was, Verity, robe wrapped around her, teacup in hand, her gray hair pinned back but a few strands loose around her face. Her eyes widened, then narrowed with the practiced caution she always carried when facing something uncomfortable. "Darla," she said, voice even, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, the calculation, the hesitation. "Mom," I replied, keeping my voice steady. For a moment, we just stood there, air thick between us, neither of us moving. Then she stepped aside, letting me in with a slight tilt of her head. Inside, the scent of chamomile hung in the air, a half-eaten piece of toast on a plate by the sink, the soft tick of the kitchen clock echoing in the small space. We walked to the living room, and I noticed the walls filled with photos, Isolde's kids, Isolde's vacations, Isolde's smiles, but none of me, not in these last 5 years. She sat on the edge of her recliner, the teacup trembling slightly as she brought it to her lips. "You look tired," she said, the judgment wrapped neatly in motherly concern. I ignored it, sitting across from her, pressing my palms against my knees to keep from clenching them. "We need to talk about the will, about the estate." Her eyes shifted, glancing toward the window, the steam from her cup curling around her face. "It's complicated, sweetheart." "Isolde made it complicated," I replied, keeping my tone calm, letting the silence after hang between us. She shook her head, taking a small sip of tea, avoiding my eyes. "She was helping me with the paperwork. You left, Darla. You left us, and it wasn't fair to Isolde to handle everything alone." The old sting of being labeled the deserter pulsed, but I didn't let it pull me under. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," I said. "I left because I was pushed out." She sighed, setting the cup down on the coffee table, her hands folding in her lap. "There's no point digging this up now." "There is," I pressed, leaning forward. "Gideon came to me. He showed me what she's been doing, the accounts, the transfers, the lies. She's been stealing, Mom. From you, from the family, from me." Her shoulders stiffened, and she reached for the cup again but missed, her hand trembling. "That's not... She wouldn't..." "She would, and she did." My voice cracked, but I steadied it. "You know she did." Verity's eyes filled, and she looked away, blinking rapidly. The room felt like it shrank around us, the ticking clock suddenly too loud. "Mom," I said softly, "tell me the truth." The silence stretched so long I heard the birds outside again, their songs muffled through the glass. She pressed her lips together, eyes closing as if to block out the world. When she opened them, they were wet, her voice a whisper I had to lean in to hear. "She told me if I didn't sign the new documents she would stop helping with the medical bills," she said, her voice cracking, her hands trembling as they covered her mouth. "She said you didn't care about us anymore, that you were too busy with your own life to bother." My breath caught, the ache in my chest sharper than I expected. "You believed her?" "She made it so easy to believe," she whispered, tears sliding down her face. "I was scared. I couldn't afford to lose her help." "And you let her push me out," I said, my voice low, shaking but controlled. "I thought I was protecting the family," she said, tears dripping onto her robe. I sat back, letting the truth settle, the betrayal layered with her weakness, the way she folded when she should have stood up for me, for us. "I can't keep pretending anymore," I said, voice stronger now, clearer. "I'm going to get to the bottom of this, Mom, even if it means tearing everything down." She sobbed softly, covering her face with her hands, rocking gently in her chair. I stood, stepping toward the door, pausing as I opened it. "I'm sorry," she whispered behind me, her voice so soft it barely reached me. I didn't turn around. As I stepped onto the porch, the cool air met my face, and I closed the door behind me, letting her words follow me, but not letting them stop me. As I left, my mother's whispered "I'm sorry" followed me out the door, but it was too late for sorry. I drove home with the windows half down, letting the cool, overcast breeze wash away the scent of old chamomile and the heaviness of my mother's whispered regret. By the time I pulled into the cracked driveway, the sky had shifted from gray to near black, streetlights flickering on one by one as I parked and shut off the engine. I sat there for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled, before stepping out into the thickening evening air. Inside, I turned on the porch light that hummed and buzzed, illuminating the small front stoop where I'd once set down boxes of groceries for my mother, where I'd once believed family meant safety. Now, it cast long, thin shadows through the blinds as I moved into the kitchen, filling the kettle with water and setting it to boil. I stood there, leaning against the counter, watching steam begin to curl in the air, remembering the way my mother's eyes had fallen when she finally admitted the truth. The house was quiet, save for the tick of the clock and the occasional creak in the floorboards that made me glance toward the door, half expecting the past to walk back in, demanding to be heard. I was pouring hot water over the tea bag, letting it steep, when the knock came. It wasn't polite or hesitant. It was a hard, demanding thump, the kind you feel in your bones. I looked through the blinds, heart kicking once, sharp and cold, as I saw her car parked crookedly at the curb. Isolde. She didn't wait for me to open the door fully before she pushed past me, storming inside with the smell of her sharp perfume and the cold air trailing behind her. She threw her purse down on the floor, eyes darting around the kitchen before settling on me, nostrils flaring. "You think you're going to ruin everything for me?" Her voice was low but vibrating with rage, hands clenching and unclenching as she paced the small space like a caged animal. I moved calmly to the other side of the counter, wrapping my hands around the warm mug to steady the trembling I didn't want her to see. "You came all the way here to yell, Isolde? That's new." She laughed, but it was brittle, a sound that cracked in the middle. "You don't get to do this, Darla. You don't get to come back after all these years and pretend you're the victim. You left." I took a sip of tea, letting the heat burn my tongue as I swallowed slowly. Or maybe I was pushed out. She stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. "You've been talking to Gideon. Maybe he's tired of covering your messes." She slammed her hand on the counter, making the mug rattle. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you know everything." I set the mug down, meeting her glare without flinching. "I know you've been stealing from Mom, from the estate, from me." Her laugh this time was a harsh bark. She reached into her purse, pulling out a folder, slamming it onto the counter and flipping it open to reveal printed emails, photos, documents I couldn't quite see from where I stood. "You want to play games, Darla? I can play too," she spat. "I have enough here to make you look unstable, to make you look like you've been harassing me, threatening me. You really think anyone will believe you over me?" The words hung heavy between us, the soft hum of the porch light the only sound for a moment. "You'd do that," I said, quietly, the realization settling in like a stone. "You'd ruin what's left of this family just to keep your secrets." She leaned in, her face inches from mine, the smell of her perfume almost suffocating. "I will take everything if you push me, Darla. The house, the money, Mom's care, everything." My jaw clenched, the pulse in my neck hammering so loud I was sure she could hear it. I glanced past her, seeing a folded napkin on the counter, the one I had absent-mindedly shaped into a small leaf the night before, a habit I'd carried from years back. A reminder of the girl I used to be, the girl who would have backed down. But not now. I turned my gaze back to her, letting the calm settle into my bones, letting her see the steel in my eyes. "Try me." She blinked, taken aback for just a moment before her face twisted with anger. "You're going to regret this." "I have evidence," I said, voice steady. "I'm ready to go public, legal, whatever it takes." She let out a sound, half a scoff, half a growl, and slapped the counter so hard the papers shifted, some falling to the floor. "You're nothing, Darla. You've always been nothing." I leaned forward, lowering my voice so she had to lean in to hear me. "We'll see." She stared at me, eyes wild, chest heaving, before snatching her purse from the floor, shoving the papers back into it with shaking hands. She walked to the door, pausing just long enough to turn back and hiss, "This isn't over." As the door slammed shut behind her, I knew the real war had just begun. After Isolde left, the house felt like it was holding its breath, the silence loud enough to drown out the rain tapping against the windows. I locked the door, checked it twice, and stood there for a moment, letting the adrenaline drain from my veins. The kettle on the stove let out a soft hiss, and I poured a cup of tea I wouldn't drink, the steam curling in the dim kitchen light as I replayed her threat over and over. I barely slept, turning in bed, sheets twisted around me, checking my phone for messages that never came. When dawn finally slipped between the blinds, I dressed in jeans and a sweater, tied my hair back, and drove across town under a sky heavy with clouds that threatened another downpour. Gideon's house was modest, the kind of place you pass by without noticing, But inside, it was chaos. Papers spread across the dining table, ledgers open, laptops blinking with notifications. He greeted me with a tired nod, dark circles under his eyes, coffee in hand. "Morning," he said, voice rough. "Did she come by?" I nodded, pulling out a chair, setting my phone on the table, the screen lighting up with notifications I ignored. "She tried to scare me off." "She's scared," Gideon replied, rubbing his jaw. "Which means we're getting close." We worked in silence for a while, flipping through the ledgers he had managed to pull from hidden folders on Verity's accounts, names I recognized, dates that matched moments when I had asked Mom for help and been told, "There's nothing to give." I saw Isolde's signature, sometimes neat, sometimes hurried, on forms I never knew existed. Gideon clicked on his phone, playing a voicemail, Isolde's voice filling the room, too loud in the quiet. "I did what I had to do, Gideon. She doesn't get to come back and ruin everything." I closed my eyes for a second, the betrayal washing over me, heavy and sharp. When I opened them, I saw a napkin on Gideon's counter, folded into a small leaf. "His daughters," he said earlier, from an art project. The same fold I used to make at family dinners before I stopped being invited. It was like a spark, a reminder that I was done being quiet. "I'm not letting her do this," I said, meeting Gideon's eyes. He nodded. "We need to be smart. We go to the lawyer first. Get this in order before she tries something else." I took a sip of the coffee he poured me, bitter but hot, grounding me as we sorted files, scanned documents, saved everything twice, once to a hard drive and once to a cloud account. The rain picked up, tapping against the windows, as the day stretched into evening, the two of us moving like a practiced team through stacks of paper and digital files. Then my phone started buzzing, messages from numbers I recognized, people I hadn't heard from in years. "Why are you spreading lies about your sister? Darla, you need to stop this. What's wrong with you?" I read them in silence, the words blurring together, my heart pounding. Isolde was already out there, twisting the story, painting me as the villain. I looked at Gideon, who took the phone from my hand, reading the messages before setting it down. "She's trying to scare you," he said softly. "She knows this is the only way to keep you quiet." I stood, pacing, the fear trying to claw its way up my throat. They'll believe her. They always do. I'm the one who left, who stayed away. "And now you're the one coming back for the truth," Gideon countered. "Darla, the truth will hold. Let her scream. Let her lie. We'll stand on what we have." I wanted to believe him. I looked around the room, the evidence stacked around us, the life Isolde had tried to bury now sitting in plain sight. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something stronger. A quiet anger, sharpening into resolve. I sat back down, opening my laptop, pulling up the email to the attorney Gideon had arranged for us. We uploaded files, voice recordings, screenshots, documents with highlighted signatures and transactions. Then, just before hitting send, I opened the camera on my laptop, recording myself. "My name is Darla. This is what my sister has done. This is what we're going to prove." My voice was steady, calm, as I detailed the fraud, the manipulation, the threats. I ended the recording, saving it in the same folder, a backup in case she tried to twist the story further. The cursor hovered over the send button, the rain outside slowing to a gentle patter. I felt Gideon's hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "This is it," he said. I nodded, taking a breath that felt like the first full breath I'd had in years. I hit send on the file, knowing there was no turning back now. After I hit send, I sat there for a moment, the glow of the laptop screen fading as the rain started to tap harder against the kitchen window. It was early evening, that heavy blue hour when the streetlights flickered on, catching the wet pavement and turning it into rivers of amber. I wrapped my hands around the cold coffee cup, letting the chill seep into my skin, steadying me. There was no turning back now, and I knew it. My phone buzzed, lighting up on the counter with her name. Isolde. I closed my eyes, took a breath that felt like swallowing stones, and pressed the speaker button. Her voice hit me like a slap. "You ungrateful snake!" she shouted, words rolling over each other, rage seeping through every syllable. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stayed quiet, letting her fury crash against the silence between us. The rain outside picked up, thunder rumbling somewhere far off, as if the sky itself was tired of holding back. "You've destroyed this family, Darla. Do you hear me?" she screamed, voice cracking. "You think sending files and playing detective makes you a hero? It makes you pathetic." She spat out words like venom, telling me she had proof of things I had never done, threats of lawyers, of restraining orders, of dragging me through the mud until I was nothing. She told me I was a selfish, bitter old maid who couldn't stand seeing her sister succeed. I let her go on. Let her burn every bridge she thought she was defending. Let her paint herself in the colors I already knew were there. When she finally fell silent, the only sound was her breathing hard, the hiss of rain on the glass, and the distant rumble of thunder. "You finished?" I asked, my voice low, calm. I could almost see her pacing, see her hair clinging to her cheeks from sweat or tears, couldn't tell which. "Darla, you need to take it back," she snapped, her voice dropping to a cold, clipped tone. "Retract the files, call the lawyer, and tell them you lied. You can still fix this. We can fix this." I glanced down at the leaf-shaped napkin on the counter, the one I had folded days before when I first decided I wouldn't be the quiet one anymore. It was damp from where I had set my mug, but it still held its shape. I pressed a fingertip to it, grounding myself. "I'm not taking it back," I said, steady as the rain outside. "It's already with the lawyer, the authorities, and the family. They know, Isolde. They all know now." There was a pause, and I heard her breath catch, like a gasp she tried to swallow. "You're making a mistake," she hissed, desperation leaking into her words. "You think you're so righteous, but you don't know how the world works. People like you—" "People like me?" I cut in, finally letting the steel in my voice rise. "People like me stay quiet, so people like you can keep stealing, lying, and pretending you're the hero. I'm done with that. You made your choices, Isolde. Now you'll live with them." There was a rustling sound, the sharp intake of breath, and then her voice came back, low and vicious. "You'll regret this, Darla. I will ruin you." The line clicked, leaving the kitchen humming with the echo of her threat. I let out a breath, realizing I had been gripping the counter so hard my knuckles were white. I straightened, pressing my palms flat to the cool surface, feeling the tension leave my body in slow waves. Outside, the storm broke open, rain pouring in heavy sheets, the gutters overflowing, the air smelling like wet earth and electricity. I stood there, listening, watching the water run down the window in crooked lines, and for the first time in years I didn't feel small. The fear was still there, but it had changed, sharpened into something I could hold. I wasn't afraid of her anymore, or of what people might say, or of the silence that had been my shield for too long. I was ready. The storm outside raged, but for the first time in years I felt steady. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean, the air smelling like damp earth and new beginnings. I opened the kitchen window, letting in the breeze that still held the chill of the storm that had raged the night before. The curtains swayed gently, brushing against my arm as I stood there. Coffee warm in my hands, watching the morning light push through the clouds. My phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me back. I saw the lawyer's name and felt my breath catch before I answered. "It's done," he said, his voice calm, practiced. "The authorities have accepted the documentation. Isolde's accounts are frozen, and the process for restitution has begun." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone tighter to my ear, letting the relief sink in like sunlight on cold skin. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel it fully, the quiet vindication, the proof that the truth mattered, that I hadn't fought for nothing. After I hung up, I set the phone down and stared at the leaf-shaped napkin on the counter. I picked it up, smoothing its edges, remembering the day I had first folded one like it, trying to keep peace at a family dinner while Isolde rolled her eyes and snatched it from my hands. That part of me, the part that kept folding, hoping, waiting for their approval, was done. I tucked the napkin into a drawer and closed it softly. The phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. I hesitated, letting it ring once, twice, before picking up. "Darla," Verity's voice was strained, raw. I heard about Isolde, about everything." There was a pause, the quiet hum of her breath, the faint sound of birds outside her window. "She's saying you're tearing the family apart," she whispered, like she was confessing a sin. "I don't know what to believe anymore." "I know," I replied, my voice even. "But you do know the truth now." She started to cry softly, the sound of a woman who had lived too long trying to protect a lie. Can't we fix this? Can't you help the family heal?" I closed my eyes, steadying myself before answering. "I can't fix what she chose to break, Mom. I'm sorry." She didn't say anything, only breathed into the phone, and I let her sit in that silence, the reality of the choices she had made settling around her. We ended the call quietly, no goodbyes, just the sound of the line going dead. Later that morning, I walked down to the corner coffee shop, the one with the scratched wooden tables and the big windows that let in the morning light. I found a seat by the window, my coffee warm in my hands, and watched families walk by, mothers holding tiny hands, couples sharing quiet laughter, a man jogging with a dog trotting beside him. I thought about all the years I had spent erasing myself, letting their needs and demands overshadow every piece of me that was trying to breathe. I had allowed myself to believe that keeping the peace was worth more than the truth, that silence was safer than standing alone. My phone buzzed on the table and I saw her name again. Isolde. One final message. We could have kept this between us. I stared at the words, at the cold manipulation still hanging in every letter, and for the first time, I smiled. A small, quiet smile. I hit delete without responding, letting the phone fall silent again. I took a slow breath, letting it fill me completely, and realized the wound of all this would never fully heal, but it didn't have to define me anymore. I was grateful for Gideon's courage, for the way he had chosen truth over comfort, and I was grateful for my own decision to finally stand up. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about moving. Maybe to a quieter place, somewhere near water, where I could start my own paralegal consultancy, build something that was mine alone. I might visit Verity one day, but it would be on my terms, not hers, not Isolde's. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the war that had just ended, the quiet victory that tasted like freedom. I breathed it in, letting the crisp morning air settle inside me. I was no longer afraid of Isolde. I was no longer afraid of being alone. And if she ever sends me another box, I'll be ready.